She walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage with trembling hands and a heart full of doubt. But within minutes, Sydnie Christmas had not only silenced the judges, she had the entire nation on its feet. To the world, it looked like an overnight success, the fairy tale ending reality TV is built on. But what if we told you there was far more to her story than the cameras ever revealed? This is the truth about Sydnie Christmas. The struggles, the controversy, and the resilience that Britain's Got Talent didn't want you to see. Sydnie Christmas's story did not begin under the bright lights of Britain's Got Talent. It began in the quiet town of Gravesend, Kent, where she was born in 1995. Like so many children with big dreams, Sydnie was drawn to music and performance at a young age. She wasn't the type to be satisfied blending into the background. Instead, she imagined herself standing on stage, commanding attention and sharing her voice with the world. Her parents, seeing her enthusiasm, encouraged her passions, even though they knew the path of a performer was anything but easy. By the time Sydnie was a teenager, her ambitions were clear. She wanted to make it in theater, the West End being her ultimate dream. To pursue this, she enrolled at the D&B Academy of Performing Arts, one of the country's respected training grounds for young performers. Here, she honed her voice, practiced dance routines, and absorbed the discipline it takes to survive in an industry notorious for its rejections. Teachers recognized her talent, describing her as a raw but determined performer who carried both vocal power and emotional depth. But as Sydnie would later admit, talent was never going to be enough, not in a field as competitive as musical theater. After graduating, Sydnie entered the world of professional auditions. She soon discovered the reality of an industry that demands resilience. Casting directors often dismissed her after a single song or even just a glance. Too much vibrato, one might say. Not the right look, another would remark. Each rejection felt like a small cut, and as the years went on, those cuts began to scar. Unlike the glamorous images people often associate with musical theater, Sydnie's day-to-day reality was one of instability, uncertainty, and constant hustle. To make ends meet, she took jobs wherever she could find them. She performed on cruise ships, singing to holiday makers who clapped politely, but often treated the show as background entertainment. She accepted work in touring productions, where long hours and relentless travel wore her down. One of her most notable roles was in Starlight Express in Germany, a demanding show that pushed her physically and vocally. Though it was steady work, it still wasn't the career-defining breakthrough she longed for. To outsiders, her resume might have looked impressive. International shows, cruise performances, a solid list of credits. But to Sydnie, it felt like she was stuck in a cycle of chasing gigs without ever stepping into the spotlight she had, imagined as a girl in Gravesend. What most people didn't realize at the time was that Sydnie's journey with Britain's Got Talent actually started years before her breakthrough moment in 2024. She auditioned for the show multiple times over a span of 4 years. But here's the twist. Each time she was given the chance, she walked away before the cameras rolled. The pressure was overwhelming. She would sit in the waiting room, surrounded by performers buzzing with nerves, listening to the distant murmur of the judges and the roar of the audience on the other side of the stage. And each time, fear won. She simply couldn't do it. For Sydnie, the thought of walking onto that massive stage with 4 celebrity judges and millions of viewers ready to scrutinize her every move was paralyzing. She doubted herself at every turn. What if I'm not good enough? What if I embarrass myself? What if I've been chasing a dream that was never meant for me? These questions haunted her, and in the end, they convinced her to walk away, before the audition even began. This cycle of near misses and self-sabotage took a heavy toll. Each abandoned audition left her feeling more defeated, more convinced that she wasn't cut out for stardom. She later admitted that she thought seriously about giving up singing altogether. For a performer who had trained for years, who had poured her heart into every note, The idea of quitting wasn't just sad, it was devastating. She was tired of rejection, tired of fear, tired of feeling like she would never live up to her own expectations. By 2023, Sydnie was at a breaking point. She had talent, yes, but talent without opportunity or confidence is like a flame without air. She found herself working regular jobs, including shifts at a local gym, simply to pay the bills. The dream of the West End felt impossibly far away. The glimmer of fame she once imagined as a teenager seemed to have dimmed to almost nothing, and yet, despite everything, there was still a spark inside her. Friends and family often reminded her of her gift, encouraging her to try again. They saw the same thing Amanda Holden and the rest of the world would eventually see. A voice powerful enough to stop you in your tracks, a vulnerability that made every lyric feel personal, and a presence that could fill a room. But at that time, Sydnie couldn't see it herself. All she saw were the failures, the missed chances, and the weight of her own fear. This is the side of her story that Britain's Got Talent didn't show you. The years of invisible struggle, the countless times she nearly walked away forever, and the reality of a dreamer trapped between ambition and self-doubt. Before the golden buzzer moment, before the confetti, before the public vote crowned her the winner, Sydnie Christmas was just another young woman on the edge of giving up. Her story reminds us that success isn't just about talent or opportunity. It's also about timing, perseverance, and the courage to take a leap when everything inside you says to run. For Sydnie, that leap would finally come in 2024. But at this point in her journey, the world still didn't know her name. She was simply a performer struggling to survive in an unforgiving industry, carrying a dream that felt more like a burden than a blessing. When Sydnie Christmas finally gathered the courage to step back onto the Britain's Got Talent stage in 2024, it wasn't just another audition. For her, it was the culmination of years of hesitation, rejection, and self-doubt. She walked out not as someone confident of victory, but as someone who had almost quit entirely. At that moment, it wasn't about winning a competition. It was about proving to herself that she could stand there at all. The atmosphere inside the London Palladium was electric that day. The audience buzzed with anticipation, unaware of the significance this moment held for Sydnie. The judges, Simon, Cowell, Amanda Holden, Alicia Dixon, and Bruno Tonioli, sat poised, ready to evaluate yet another hopeful act in a long day of auditions. When Sydnie introduced herself, she came across as humble, even a little nervous. She wasn't the polished diva one might expect. Instead, she was open, vulnerable, and instantly relatable. She explained that she would be singing Tomorrow from Annie, a choice that seemed almost naive at first. After all, the song is associated with optimism, childhood innocence, and hope, qualities that could easily fall flat if delivered without depth. But from the very first note, it was clear this was no ordinary audition. Sydnie's voice carried, not just technical skill, but lived experience. Every lyric felt like a reflection of her own struggles, the disappointments of yesterday, the fragile hope of a brighter tomorrow. The audience leaned in, captivated. By the time she reached the crescendo, people were rising to their feet, swept away by the sheer emotion of her performance. Amanda Holden, visibly moved, did something that would change Sydnie's life forever. With tears in her eyes, she slammed the golden buzzer. Gold confetti rained down as Sydnie dropped to her knees, overwhelmed. It was the kind of television moment producers dream of. Genuine, emotional, unforgettable. But beyond the spectacle, it was a deeply personal victory. For Sydnie, the golden buzzer was more than a ticket to the semi-finals. It was validation, after years of fear. It was proof that she was good enough. The clip of that audition went viral almost immediately. Millions watched online, sharing it across social media, praising her as a once-in-a-generation talent. Headlines described her as the nation's new sweetheart, while fans called her performance spine-tingling and breathtaking. For someone who had nearly given up, the sudden flood of attention was dizzying. Overnight, Sydnie went from an unknown performer working at a gym to a household name. But the audition was only the beginning. The competition still lay ahead, and with the golden buzzer came heightened expectations. Every performance would be scrutinized, every choice dissected. Could she deliver again, or had she peaked too soon? When the semifinals arrived, Sydnie answered those doubts with a performance that silenced even her harshest critics. Her rendition of My Way wasn't just technically brilliant, it was defiant. Every note carried the weight of her journey. The rejections, the auditions abandoned in fear, the years of hustling for roles that barely paid the bills. In those few minutes, she declared to the world that she had done things her way, and that she wasn't about to apologize for it. The audience erupted, the judges showered her with praise, and the momentum behind her only grew. Then came the grand finale. Sydnie chose Over the Rainbow, a song deeply tied to themes of longing and hope. It was a bold choice, given its iconic status, but Sydnie approached it with tenderness and vulnerability. She didn't belt every note at maximum power. Instead, she let the silences breathe, allowed the emotion to seep into every phrase. It was less about vocal gymnastics and more about honesty. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Simon Cowell, known for his tough critiques, admitted he had been completely moved. When the votes were tallied, Sydnie emerged as the clear winner, securing over 27% of the public vote. A landslide by the show's standards. She had done it. After years of walking away, after battling her own fears, after nearly giving up, she had won Britain's Got Talent. On stage that night, as confetti once again fell around her, Sydnie looked stunned, almost disbelieving. She clutched her face, tears streaming as she thanked the audience and her family. It was the image of a dream realized, the fairy tale ending that fans crave. For the public, it seemed like the perfect story. An underdog who had conquered her fears, wowed the nation, and emerged victorious. But here's what the television cameras didn't capture. Behind the smiles and the confetti, Sydnie was already bracing herself. Because with great visibility comes great scrutiny, and with victory comes backlash. Even in those moments of triumph, she sensed that not everyone was celebrating. Some were already questioning whether her journey was as authentic as it seemed. Still, Chapter 2 of her story is about triumph. It's about a woman who had walked away 4 times before finally standing tall. It's about a voice that could shake a theater and a heart that dared to be vulnerable in front of millions. The golden buzzer wasn't just a flashy television gimmick. It was a lifeline. For Sydnie Christmas, it marked the day her tomorrow finally arrived. For millions of viewers, Sydnie Christmas's win on Britain's Got Talent in 2024 felt like a fairy tale ending. She had been the underdog, the nervous performer who turned her fear into triumph, and the golden buzzer star who stole the nation's heart. But just as quickly as her confetti-filled victory captured headlines, another story began to unfold. One that wasn't nearly as celebratory. The backlash started almost immediately. In the hours after her win, social media platforms lit up with comments, debates, and accusations. Some critics argued that the show had been rigged in Sydnie's favor. They pointed out that she had performed last in the finale, a coveted slot that tends to leave a lasting impression on the audience. To them, this was evidence that producers had carefully orchestrated the outcome, ensuring Sydnie had the best possible chance of winning. The narrative of a spontaneous victory, they claimed, wasn't quite as organic as it seemed, but the accusations didn't stop at the running order. Soon, online forums and tabloids began digging into Sydnie's background. They discovered her. Years of training at the D&B Academy of Performing Arts, her professional gigs abroad, and her stint in Starlight Express in Germany. Headlines began to shift. Was she really the undiscovered talent Britain's Got Talent had presented her to be? Was the show misleading the public by portraying her as a nervous amateur when, in reality, she was a seasoned performer with years of experience? For Sydnie, this sudden wave of criticism was devastating. After years of battling her own self-doubt, the suggestion that her story was somehow dishonest felt like a personal attack. She later admitted that the accusations were soul-destroying. In interviews, she explained that she had never claimed to be a complete amateur. Yes, she had performed abroad. Yes, she had taken gigs wherever she could find them, but none of that equated to the kind of stardom critics were accusing her of. She hadn't been a West End headliner. She hadn't enjoyed fame or financial security. Instead, she had been scraping by, working in a gym to pay rent, and quietly wondering if she should give up on performing altogether. What Britain's Got Talent didn't show was the scale of her struggle. Viewers saw a performer with confidence and presence, but they didn't see the years of rejections, the auditions that went nowhere, or the countless times she was told she simply wasn't right for a role. They didn't see the tears shed after walking out of auditions, the anxiety that had kept her from facing the BGT judges for 4 years in a row. To paint her as an insider exploiting the system wasn't just unfair, it was a distortion of reality. Still, the debate only intensified. Some insisted that the show had lost its way, that it was no longer a platform for undiscovered talent plucked from obscurity, but rather a stage for professionals who hadn't yet found their big break. Others defended Sydnie, pointing out that the entertainment industry is complex and that countless performers take small jobs without ever becoming household names. Having experience, they argued, doesn't mean a person doesn't deserve a chance. This clash of perspectives revealed something bigger than Sydnie's individual story. It exposed a growing tension in the very nature of Britain's Got Talent. The show in its earliest seasons had thrived on the idea of ordinary people, unknown singers, dancers, magicians, and comedians, suddenly becoming stars. It was about discovery, about giving someone from a small town the chance to wow the world. But as the years went on, more and more contestants entered the competition with professional training, agency representation, or even international experience. For some viewers, this evolution felt like a betrayal of the original premise. Caught in the middle was Sydnie, who had never set out to deceive anyone. All she had done was step onto a stage, sing her heart out, and finally take a chance on a dream she had nearly abandoned. But as criticism grew louder, she was forced to defend her authenticity again and again. "Everything has been genuine," she told interviewers firmly. "Saying it's not is questioning me as a person." The emotional toll was heavy. Instead of being able to enjoy her victory, Sydnie found herself under a microscope, her every word and past performance dissected by strangers online. While many fans rallied around her, others seemed determined to tear her down. The fairy tale had become complicated, tainted by suspicion and cynicism. And yet, through it all, Sydnie showed remarkable resilience. She didn't lash out at critics or retreat into silence. Instead, she acknowledged the hurt, but refused to let it define her. She continued to sing, to share her voice, and to remain grounded. When asked about the controversy, she often returned to the same truth. She had worked hard for years. She had doubted herself endlessly, and she had finally found the courage to step onto that stage. No amount of online speculation could erase that reality. The backlash also sparked broader conversations among fans and commentators. Should Britain's Got Talent tighten its rules about professional experience? Should there be separate categories for amateurs and trained performers? Or was the very point of the show to celebrate talent, regardless of background? These debates extended far beyond Sydnie's personal journey, touching on the identity of the show itself. For Sydnie, though, the noise was background to a much simpler truth. She had faced her fears, sung with every ounce of her being, and won the support of millions. No amount of online criticism could take away the fact that, when the votes were counted, the public had chosen her. But if Chapter 3 of her story is about backlash, it's also about resilience. It's about how, even when her authenticity was questioned and her victory challenged, Sydnie refused to be broken. She had already walked away from auditions in the past, already let fear dictate her choices. This time, she would not walk away. She would face the criticism head-on and prove, not through arguments, but through music, that she belonged exactly where she was. As the dust settled from the controversy, a new question began to emerge. What would Sydnie Christmas do next? Would she fade into the background like so many talent show winners before her? Or would she use this moment, controversy and all, as a springboard into a lasting career? The answer would come in the months that followed. Months that revealed yet another side of her story, one rooted not in fame or glamour, but in humility, perseverance, and the quiet determination to keep going no matter what. For many winners of Britain's Got Talent, the story ends with the finale. They step off the stage, clutch their trophy, collect the prize money, and enjoy a brief burst of fame before quietly fading into the background. The entertainment industry is littered with former winners whose names the public barely remembers, their victories reduced to nostalgic trivia. But Sydnie Christmas's journey after her triumph was different. Her story didn't end when the confetti fell. In many ways, it was only just beginning. In the immediate days after her win, Sydnie's life changed dramatically. She went from working shifts at a local gym in Gravesend to appearing in national newspapers, morning talk shows, and trending across social media. Reporters wanted interviews, fans wanted selfies, and promoters wanted to know if she was available to perform. For a young woman who had spent most of her adult life hustling for work and doubting her place in the industry, the sudden attention was overwhelming, and yet Sydnie handled it with the same humility that had made her so relatable during the competition. Sydnie Christmas's journey proves that dreams don't happen overnight. They're built on years of sacrifice, self-doubt, and the courage to keep going when the world tells you to quit. Whether you see her as the underdog who defied the odds or the professional who finally got her break, one thing is certain: